And that will last hopefully 30 to 45 minutes. And then we'll get into the regular order of business. Okay, it's 5 o'clock, so we're going to get started. As I said, we're going to bring up the appeal, which is 2017-455, and that is on my page at 10. But right now, we're going to say hello to Vaughn.
Good evening, Yvonne Mitchell, Council Research.
Danny Beckton, District 11.
Reginald Gaffin, District 7.
Matt Schellenberg, District 6.
Bill Carr, District 12.
Al Ferrero, District 2.
Go ahead.
Susan Grandin, Office of General Counsel.
Christian Popoli, Planning and Development.
Kristen Reed, Planning and Development.
Bruce Lewis, Planning and Development.
I'm very patient, at least for now.
Folks, Oxford Planning and Development Department.
You know we can't get this meeting without you folks. Okay, thank you very much. So let's go back to what I said earlier. We're going to do the appeal first. So it's on page 10, item 25, 2017-455. And all the members of the committee have been handed out a procedure in which we're going to follow. So if you have any questions, let me know. But the first thing we're going to do is see if there's any ex parte on this from any council members. And seeing none, we'll move to the next step, which is we're going to have the procedure is that each side will have 10 minutes. We can ask them questions during that process, but we're going to give the applicant and the OGC 10 minutes to present their case. So the first person will give us an overview about what we're doing. Sonia, would you come on up with your scooter there? There you go. Everybody should have a scooter. Identify yourself and tell us what we're actually doing, please. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Through the chair, I'm Sandra Fettner. I'm an assistant general counsel with OGC. You are here today on an appeal for resolution 2017-455. It concerns an appeal filed by Rachel Ringhaver on behalf of Ring Properties Investment LLC, the owner of the property located at 3205 Herschel Street in the Riverside Avondale Historic District. The appellant is appealing the Jacksonville Historic Preservation Commission's decision issued on June 5th, 2017. She specifically requests the reversal of the commission's condition requiring different pavers than the type she installed without a certificate of appropriateness. Pursuant to section 307-202A, Ms. Ringhaver has standing to appeal as she is the person who filed the original certificate of appropriateness. The appeal of the commission decision is heard de novo, which is Latin for anew. Essentially, the application is heard for a second time before this committee of the council, which sits as the fact-finding body and decision-making body. The record from the commission, including the testimony and written statements from the April 26th and May 24th, 2017 public hearings, as well as the application, the staff report, the presentations of staff and appellant, and the order of approval with conditions, are all part of the record on appeal. At the end of this hearing, you'll have an opportunity to affirm, reverse, or modify the contested decision, or you may refer the matter back to the commission with specific instructions for further action. Identical to the standard before the commission, your decision today must be based on substantial competent evidence. Furthermore, the decision of this committee shall be deemed the final action of the city. and shall be subjected to no further review under our Code of Ordinances. Section 307, 106K and L, and the Historic Preservation Design Regulations for the Riverside Avondale Historic District, which I believe Susan Grandin provided to you today, is the criteria for your consideration of this application for a COA. Furthermore, there's also a copy of 307, 106C and D, since the work was done prior to receiving a certificate of appropriateness on the city right-of-way. So unless you have any questions about procedure or standing or the process of the appeal, nothing based on argument, I can answer that now. If not, I'll sit down and pass it.
Great. Well, there's no one on queue, but you're going to be here for any questions that might come up. Is that correct? As well as Ms. Grandin. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You're going to be here for the appeals process?
Oh, yes, I'm arguing on behalf of the
Great.
Historic Preservation.
Okay, great.
And also we have Christian Popoli, who is the supervisor for the historic section as well, to answer questions.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, Ms. Brown, thank you very much for joining us. And I see that you're going to take over some duties for me, and I greatly appreciate it. It's obvious that I didn't know what to do, so I gave it to you. Thank you. The smarter one of us. So, is the applicant here? Great. So you now have 10 minutes. Come on up and identify yourself and who you are, and we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm Rachel Ringhaver. My husband and I own Ring Property Investments, and we are the owner of the property we're discussing, 3205 Herschel Street. Just wanted to let you know, we've, about 2 years ago, we purchased this property. It was in very bad condition, and we poured a lot of money and time into restoring it to its original glory. We took every detail to heart in bringing it back to the way that Marsh & Saxelby meant it to be, and it should have been. It's a beautiful Marsh & Saxelby 8-unit apartment building in Riverside, Avondale area. And I'll just say that at the end, towards the end of our renovation process, about a year in, we had been looking at all of the tenants parking on the front of the building, which was the way that it had been when we bought the building. But we found out through research it was the way it had been from the 50s. Once cars got bigger, they grew out of the size of the parking in the rear and could no longer maneuver back there. So they just parked on the front. What that looks like now, before we renovated, was mud and just ugly and dirty and doing nothing for the street. We are on a particular street that is all apartment buildings, very small, no parking. Everyone parks in the front on the whole street. So we were unaware of the procedures for COAs. Since then, we've gotten COAs for everything we've needed to do with our other building as well. But at the time, we were just renovating the right way and doing what we thought would be beautiful for Avondale, which my husband and I both love and grew up in. Our families still live there. And we put these pavers down. We didn't just choose pavers. We went to a lot of research. What type of pavers were, or what type of grounds were in front of homes of the 1920s era, Spanish Revival Mediterraneans at that, and also driving around Avondale. So I believe that you probably each have a copy of my appeal, which has a lot of examples that we use to help choose our pavers, and that was in driving around the historic district. We did it based on what we thought would be better for the community. And there are numerous, I only put a few of them because I thought it would get a little redundant, but we do have just many examples of pavers that we chose ours from. And we believe that that is the only, we've been approved by the Historic Preservation to have the pavers there. At this point, it's just the pavers that are that we've chosen. They'd like for them to be brick, but in order to reverse that, we don't believe it is a serious undue economic hardship. $19,000 to change the style of pavers. You should also all have an estimate in there. It's the same company that we've used. They're one of the more affordable companies in Jacksonville. And $19,000. And there are examples of what we have, identical examples, or almost identical examples, what looked like exactly to us. We tried to copy those based on, our main inspiration was one on Richmond Street. We have almost identical pavers to another Marsh & Saxelby home, and it was just done so beautifully, and that's what we wanted to bring to Avondale as well. Believe that's it. I can go through individual examples.
You're okay. Well,
Okay.
you can continue, or you can just stop. We have,
Okay.
Councilman Gaffney would like to ask you a question.
All right. Should I?
Or you want to, yeah, go ahead. He's over here.
Yes, sir.
And then
Through the chair, couple questions. One, how much? And I heard you say $19, but how much money you're gonna spend, or it's gonna be required that you spend to get it in compliance?
I'm sorry, to do what?
Get this back into compliance, the changes
That
we want to make.
we've put 300,000 into this renovation, but what 19,000
Let's
is
stop
what
right, just for a second. We can stop her because she has time, and we go to Councilman Gaffney for 5 minutes, okay?
Go ahead.
She still has 436 if she wants it. I'm sorry, Councilman. Go ahead.
Would you like me to answer?
You can alternate back and forth. No, we have 5 minutes with Mr. Gaffney. He's got 436 left, or 549. Go ahead. Okay.
So my question: are you through with your? Are you through for Zen? I can wait and ask some other questions later.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will take questions. I'm finished with
Go
my
ahead.
presentation.
No, I just want to make sure. So, from my understanding, you said the whole property itself cost $300,000, and the changes that we were requiring you to do is $19,000. My other question is, and did you at some point meet with the council person to talk about what you wanted to do?
I did not. I wasn't aware of the COA process until I first got the violation. And I immediately got on the phone with the inspector and then with the department. And the last place I wanted to be was in violation. We, renovated this wanting to follow. We respect the rules of the preservation. We did everything by the book and have continued since then to do everything by the book. But we just feel that there are enough examples in the historic district to justify the pavers that we chose. So that's why we do feel that it would be an unnecessary hardship to have to spend $20,000 more to change just the style of pavers in the front.
So, just my last question. So, if somehow you lose this appeal, what happens with you?
Most likely, if we've talked about this, most likely we lift the pavers and go back to the way it was. We don't have $20,000 more to put into this property. We already had far exceeded that, and the pavers were something that I twisted the arm to get.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Gravel is what that would be. Gravel, which turns to mud once it rains and it gets light and cars park on it.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Hold on. Mr. Beckton, Councilman Beckton.
Thank you through the chair. Ms. Ringhaver, so which property did you say impacted your decision on the pavers the most?
Well, the most, 3644 Richmond Street. It's another Marsh & Saxelby. It's actually the house my husband grew up in, and we just truly have always had a love affair with it, and we fought hard to get this home because of our love for that style architecture.
Is it in your presentation?
It is in my presentation for the historic commissioners.
Yeah, I mean, the one that we have, I guess.
Oh, it is. It is. It's actually
36. You said 3644.
3644.
Yeah, I found
Is
it.
this on the first
It's on
page? I'm sorry.
It's on our page.
On page 2.
It's on our page 15.
All right.
In her presentation.
It's the bottom picture.
Yeah. So where is that house in relation to y'all's property?
We are at the corner of Herschel and Aberdeen, and this house is on Richmond right a few streets down from Ingleside.
I mean, as it relates to, like, is it a couple of blocks away, a mile away?
5 blocks?
5 blocks? Okay. So at some point when y'all were doing this renovation, you've been down to the planning department and pulled a permit of some sort?
Well, since then, we have not, I had contractors put a roof on, they pulled a permit for that. My contractors have done permitting as they needed, but I've just let them know this is what we'd like to do.
Okay.
And was unaware of the rules that went along with historic. We were just renovating the way historic appreciates, but we're unaware of the rules until we received the first violation.
All right, so at no time did you go down to the planning department personally as the owner doing some kind of work to pull a permit or anything? It's all been through subcontractors?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And none of these subcontractors warned you, hey, you're doing this work and, you know, you're in Riverside and Avondale and there might be some hoops you need to jump through?
Well, I will say absolutely they didn't, but I do need a translator for this person. We currently don't live in Avondale. We had used them at our home.
Right.
And so I use a translator through text. But they do quality work, and that's why
Now, I'm talking
use
about like
them.
the roofer, so
The roofer,
like
I
a
believe,
roofer,
he did get,
your plaster guy, anybody
you don't need a
doing-
permit for any of that. The
Okay.
roof you do. He took care of that.
But I'm saying none of them kind of ever thought to say, hey,
No, it was in stages. The roofer was one of the first things we did. He's already gone. The plaster people, no need for permitting there. So,
Okay.
and we hired our plaster people even from Tampa. Just we were having a problem finding good people
okay.
to do the work that were available.
Okay.
And then my concrete guy who poured a new apron, he did go through all of the procedures. But then again, he's gone by the time we just poured the apron.
so y'all have no general contractor. You're doing this as owner? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
That's all I got for right now. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Mr. Beckton. Ms. Brown?
Through the chair, how you doing? Just have a couple questions for you. What was the original amount spent on the pavers for you to get it done?
We did pavers in the back as well, and so we spent about.
On the portion that they want you, now, do they
It was
want
all
you?
coupled in one.
Okay.
So we spent about with all the prep work that needed, over 50.
Over 15,000?
Over 50,000.
Oh, 50,000, okay.
And so the prep work has been done now, so to replace them would then be an additional 20 just in the front area.
Okay, and so the back pavers, they're not concerned about that?
Correct.
Okay.
We've received approval on everything else, just the style of pavers in the front.
Okay, is it a different style in the front versus the back?
They're the same.
Okay, and what was the reason why they totally denied?
They're non-conforming to what the historic is used to, brick shape, brick color. Ours are various sizes. They're all very neutral, very complementary to the home, but they're not all brick shape.
Okay, and how many other examples, I know you've seen in the book, but just tell me for my reference, how many other examples of kind of like what you did that you see through the neighborhood? If you ride, how many pavers did you do a per block of how many pavers were done and how many look like what you have currently put down in your?
I have 12 here in what I gave to you, but there are more. I just gave the 12.
So out of the 12, how
clippings.
many you say look like yours?
Color-wise, all of them. Color-wise, 10 that I've given you. Shape-wise, 8.
Okay. Do you believe that because they got a pre-approval that probably made a difference?
It very well could have. I will say, I don't know. It could have.
Okay.
I will say I have a good relationship with that department now. They know our intentions and they know that we do follow the rules and we respect the rules.
Did you have a general contractor, or did you kind of do most of the work yourself?
I do it myself.
Okay. All right. And how long did you just purchase the house, or you lived in the house for a while before you renovated it?
This is an apartment building with 8 units, and we purchased it a year and a half, possibly 2 years ago. I don't know the exact date. We purchased it, and then, but we've been, we spent 10 months doing, with it gutted, renovating it.
Okay. And that time frame, did you get, when you purchased the property, did you get anyone from the neighborhood come and welcome you or come and greet you, or anyone from that association to tell you the process of?
No one from an association. Everyone loves it, though. We're on a small, it is different. You don't have as many homeowners right on our block. We have a block that is specifically all apartment buildings. And it's the small block right at Herschel and Aberdeen. And so you've got people there in the evenings, and we were working during the day, but we did have several people walk by. In fact, the owners of another apartment building that
Okay,
everyone
that's
loves
good.
it.
My last question,
Yes.
since you stated that people like it, did you get any petition from your neighbors that said that they thought it was a good idea? Any support that you can show to us from the neighbors that?
I don't have anything. I did, ask around, but it's tenants, so they.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have anybody else on the queue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Ringhaver.
Thank
We're now going to public hearing. Do we have any cards? No cards? Good enough. Okay. The next stop is the scooter. Hey, Sonia, come on back, please. And just to let everybody know, you are representing.
The Historic Preservation Commission.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Simply put, the appellant is asking you to reverse only one condition of the commission's approval, and that has to do with the shape and size and color of the pavers. As you read in your transcript, the commission struggled with this. They struggled with allowing the design of a parking lot in front of a historic building as prominent as this one. As the appellant stated, this is a very prominent building. It's designed by some well-known architects from Jacksonville, Marsh and Saxelby. So it's a beautiful building, and to put parking in front of it, they were struggling with allowing the historical features to be covered by parking. So the commission grappled with this idea, and they decided, you know what, we'll make a compromise. Given the specific area and given the amount of parking on the right-of-way in these few blocks between Aberdeen and Herschel, we'll allow them to put a parking lot there, but we want to make sure that the pavers are historically compatible. And I think it's important to note that pavers are not a historical feature. The appellant referred to a property on Richmond Street, which is quite far in terms of the district from this property, having similar pavers. Before cars, you had gravel, you had grass. A lot of properties had concrete ribbons or just concrete. Pavers are really a new breed and a new issue that the historic district is dealing with. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that that is not something that is historical to the Richmond house. So it's important to know that, she stated she didn't have a COA. Besides not having a COA, the appellant also did not have a right-of-way permit, which would require an indemnification agreement to be putting parking in the city property. Also, she would need a variance from the Planning Commission, which would allow her to have parking in front of a building, which is prohibited in residential character areas in the Riverside-Avondale zoning overlay. So even if she gets over the certificate of appropriateness hurdle, she still has to get approval from Planning Commission for the variance, and she also has to get permission from the Planning and Development Services for a right-of-way permit. So she isn't done here. It's also important to note, Section 307-106C requires the city to notify the Commission of street improvements and repaving projects. So even the city is required to notify the commission before it goes ahead and repaves anything in the district. And unfortunately, the appellant went ahead and spent a lot of money on putting pavers down in the city right-of-way for the benefit of her tenants without going first to the Historic Planning Commission or to the permit office or the Planning Commission. I think if she did as much research as she did on the similar driveways in the district as she did on how the procedure works in the city, we wouldn't be in this place. And she would have made it through the COA process the same exact way and not have this self-inflicted undue financial burden to replace and remove the pavers that she put in. The commission's decision to allow it was predicated on these pavers. And I think it's important that if you decide to reverse the commission on their decision with the condition of the rectangular pavers, you should really look at, do you want to allow parking in the front of this property? Because that approval was predicated on rectangular pavers. You have in your staff report, you have in your packet on tab 6, the staff report, which was written by one of the city planners, Blair Mullins, and in that, she recommends a denial of the pavers because they are not compatible. So that report alone stands as your substantial competent evidence, but we also have Christian Popoli here to answer any questions and provide the same. I also I requested Christian bring a paver that's not your traditional brick that you know of, but another paver that's commonly allowed in the district, so you could see it. So it's not like we're saying you can only get brown brick. There's a lot of options, but what she put in her property is just not compatible. And I also have a handout I'm going to have passed around, and this is the street. I'm sorry, I have to pass. What you'll see here, this is a Google Maps image of Aberdeen Street, and the property is on the left-hand side. You'll see Aberdeen Street is actually quite unique. It used to be a streetcar line, and in the district, they preserved the historic brick in the middle of the road. And you can see it's substantially rectangular bricks, like what the commission and the staff recommend. And you could see the building is adjacent to Aberdeen Street. So maybe in another block far away from Aberdeen Street, this wouldn't be that big of a deal, but it is a big deal because it's adjacent to Aberdeen Street, which has rectangular bricks, and the bricks that the appellant put in is just not compatible, and it's glaringly incompatible. So I would like for you to take that into consideration. The two arguments that the appellant raised are not competent substantial evidence. Her claim of undue economic hardship is completely self-inflicted. If she went through the proper channels, the proper route, the proper approval, she wouldn't be here today because she probably would have accepted the pavers that were requested by the commission. Second, the fact that there are other properties in the district that have similar pavers, that's not substantial competent evidence. I've spoke with Christian Popoli, the supervisor of the Historic Planning Department, and he said that they've never approved square pavers or anything but rectangular pavers. So every property that she pointed out has an illegal driveway. So that's something that you need to consider. Also, we don't know if the pavers that she would have to remove, if those can be salvaged. So there might be some cost savings from removing them and replacing them. Finally, for your substantial competent evidence, in addition to the staff report, in addition to Aberdeen Street, Section 307-106L requires you to consider the design guidelines for the district. And on page 58, recommendation number 3, it says, use new plant materials, fencing, walkways, streetlight signs, and benches that are compatible with the character of the neighborhood in size, scale, materials, and color. As you can see from the Google Maps, that what the commission requested is just, it's not that far-fetched. There is some substantial competent basis for that condition. Historical rectangular bricks are in substantial conformity with the administrative matrix for pre-approved pavers. And this Aberdeen Street, it goes from St. John's Avenue all the way to Park Street. So it's a very prominent location. I want to remind you today that your decision is not whether or not she can legally park in the right-of-way. It's merely to decide whether the design that she proposes with the pavers and the greenscape, whether those are compatible with the district. She'll need to go forward to Planning Commission and the Planning Development Department to get her permit and to get her variance. So it doesn't stop here. In closing, purchasing a historic property in a historic district comes with certain expectations for residents and business owners. The regulations provided for by Chapter 307 are intended to enhance and protect the aesthetic and historic significance of each contributing property in the district. By ignoring these regulations and allowing such a prominent property to have incompatible pavers adjacent to a street like Aberdeen with a significant brick feature will diminish the historical integrity of the district. I respectfully request that you deny the appellant's request to keep the pavers as installed without prior approval from the city and uphold the Historic Preservation Commission's condition that the pavers be rectangular brick in accordance with the pre-approved matrix. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Fittner. We have two people, Ms. Brown and then Mr. Beckton. But let me ask you a quick question. So, never mind, go ahead, Ms. Brown.
To the chair, thank you. My first question is, you stated that the comparisons that she brought up about the other pavers and other driveway, they're all illegal, you stated?
They were not approved by the commission or by the historic section.
Okay, so my question would be, when did the commission start to evaluate the pavers in the driveway? Because you stated first that it wasn't really a part of the historic.
Right, that's correct. And if I could, can I defer to Christian Popoli on that, as he's the supervisor for that department?
Okay.
Or that section, sorry.
Through the chair.
Please identify yourself.
Christian Popoli, Planning and Development.
Great, thank you.
The commission began reviewing pavers at least as far back as 2015. In 2015, they specifically came up with dimensional criteria with regards to proportions for the brick shape. The brick shape was always the contemplated paver style. As Sandra had mentioned, there was never really any context for pavers, but brick were not common, but were a material that was used for driveways. So it was always the intent that they would be brick shaped, but the specifics were actually established in 2015 in the administrative matrix.
Okay, so my question to you, the other properties that were shown, was any of them done after the 2015 time period, do you know?
I had Christian look at some of those properties, and we couldn't find any COAs or anything that would have told us when those were approved or placed. Because you don't normally need a permit for your own driveway. This one's a little bit different because it's in the city right-of-way. And it's also parking in front of a building, which requires the variance. But the properties that she showed are driveways that you're allowed to have in a residential home.
Okay, so my next question would be, what is the biggest reason why you denied it? And the reason why I asked you that is because you showed us the map with the pavers in the middle of the street. So if the street design was not there, would you have approved it?
Well, I don't do any approvals.
No.
I'm just the attorney for the commission. So I can't speak to what they would have done. But their basis was looking at the district and what is used most commonly in the district, but besides concrete concrete slabs, concrete ribbon.
Okay.
So they looked at around the district. And if I can note, there's 2,400 properties in the district. Majority of them have just concrete slabs or concrete ribbons for driveways.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Mr. Beckton, Carter, and then Mr. Gaffney.
Thank you, through the chair. One of your closing statements was about diminished value. Could you restate that statement?
Sorry, I said diminished integrity, the diminished integrity of the historical district. The historical district only is as strong as its historical property. So the more that you remove historic fabric and introduce incompatible features, the historic district as a whole diminishes its historical integrity.
Okay. So the comparisons with the pavers, how many code violations have they been given? If they're illegal, all the comparisons for which have been made that you said are these pavers are, you used the word illegal.
Right.
So how many violations have they received?
They probably haven't received violations. The issue that the zoning enforcement in historic districts that they have is that they can really only catch them when it's new, when you can pinpoint the owner and the actor who did the work. So I really can't say if any of those have violations. And usually the violations come from a neighbor or someone who's walking by and calls the historic section.
Okay. How does somebody in the Avondale Riverside area, how do they know about the COA process? How would they know? If they're from out of town, they buy a house in Riverside, Avondale, and like the Ringhavers, they start fixing it up. What's there to trigger the COA process? Is it in their deed?
There's, in their closing documents, there's usually some type of notice that you're in a National Historic District, because Riverside Avondale is on the National Registry for Historic Districts. Also, the property appraiser, I believe, for the city, one of the agencies, is supposed to mail out a notice that you are in you're in a historical district and there's a COA process. In the transcript of the commission meeting, the appellant stated that she received a notice for a property she bought at the same time, but she did not receive one for this. She did live in she said she grew up in the Avondale Historic District, so I think most people know if you're ever doing any work in the historic district, there's a very large blue sign that's put in your yard.
Okay, I heard a lot of supposed to, should have, and I think most. As attorney, I have not heard any, evidence that says they did receive. They did sign in their closing documents. They do have, some definitive evidence that says they know about this, and I'm just asking, we can sit here and think all day long and think and for what people know or didn't know. So I'm just kind of asking, what evidence do we have that they did know? They had knowledge of this fact, and therefore, because we talk about a lot of times in PUDs and in zoning applications that things are buried in the code and so forth, and will people see it or not? So this is a pretty substantial penalty that we're asking be applied based on things that we don't have direct evidence that this process was front and center of what they should have done.
They did have 4 separate COAs done, 2 in 2016 and 2 in 2017. This COA that's on appeals from 2017. They also stated at at the commission hearing that they received notice that they were in a historic district they bought 2 properties around the same time. One, they received the notice. For this one, they did not. I would argue that they had constructive notice that this property was in a historic district. They also Can I finish? They also purchased this property with intent to restore it to its historic intent. And they also lived in Avondale and grew up in Avondale. And most people who live and grow up in Avondale know that it's a historic district and that the Certificate of Appropriateness and the Historic Preservation Commission controls.
All right, I'm out of time, so I'll pass it on to the next.
Great, great, Mr. Becker, and Mr. Carter, and then Mr. Gaffney. But Ms. Reed, you want to say a few words about if you are buy a house in a historic district, what does the city do?
Through the chair, just to follow up with what Ms. Fettner said, is the historic section receives a list from the property appraiser of all property transactions, and monthly we send out letters to the new property owners notifying them that they are in the historic district and notifying them that there are some regulations, and should they have any questions to please contact us.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Carter.
First, I'd say Aberdeen, if I lived in that rental house, I'd be complaining about Aberdeen needing to be redone because it's pretty rough looking. So my question is, so you would be okay with them parking on the dirt? I mean, is it illegal to park on that dirt right there? Because it looks like to me it's been parked on an awful lot.
Yes, it is actually illegal to park on the front.
Do you know how many citations have ever been given on that?
I'm not sure.
I would doubt any.
Yes, it's been one of those de minimis violations on that street.
Well, I mean, you could park on the street, so it'd be a lot safer to park on the side of the road. And I can ride through every side every day or every night, and I see people doing it all the time, and I don't see no ticket man sitting out there doing it. So I'm sure they parked in the front of there. And I guess in your part, as you said, y'all don't do historical pavers, but then right behind that, we heard something different than that. So that's confusing. Isn't there rentals like connected? Isn't there rentals on this Herschel? Isn't there rentals all the way down? Or is there more rentals like this? I've seen some houses back in my book that show more houses that's like this. I mean, more people things.
There are some multifamily properties and some single-family residential properties in those blocks.
Let's see what else I had. I mean, there's a big difference between what it was and what it is and I don't see much. I mean, these ones that's over here, I mean, okay, that's good.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Mr. Gaffney?
I'm just still trying to figure this out. So if I'm understanding you, if we approve this today, you say they still got to go back to planning.
That is correct.
So Mr. Folks, let me ask y'all. So if we approve it today, what happened when it comes back to y'all? And y'all deny it. What happens?
What Ms. Fettner was referring to is the provision in the overlay for Riverside that says you cannot park in front of a residence. That's not applicable to the rest of town, but in the Riverside overlay it is. In order to relax that requirement, they would have to go to our planning commission and ask for a variance. What would happen is they would file for the application with us. We would get it processed. We would prepare a staff report. I don't know enough about the situation to tell you what we would opine on as far as whether we would support it or not. And then it would be the decision of the planning commission whether to approve or deny the variance request. If the variance was denied, then they would be a zoning violation to park where they're parking now.
So it's possible we can prove it, but y'all could deny it based on the variance request that they need.
Well, again, the decision of the Planning Commission won't just rest on the staff report, but it would also rest on whatever evidence is brought to that particular hearing, and I don't have any way to know exactly what's going to be said at that hearing.
Okay. I got a recommendation, but I'll wait till we finish. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Gaffney. Mr. Farrar?
Thank you. I'm listening to what the Ringhavens are going through. How does a person know about the notice of the historical district? I know sitting up here sometimes we're told things and we're told by attorneys, and I don't get it. And I'm thinking, this is somebody trying to fix up their own property. I can understand where they may not get what we're saying or what the proper channels are. I'm looking at Aberdeen here, and I'm looking at this road, and I'm thinking the city's not being put up to the same standards that we're putting our constituents up to. We're saying you have to have this in a certain way, and I'm looking at every pothole on the street, and I'm thinking, you know, and then I'm looking over at what they've done. The diminished value, honestly, I must be looking at different pictures. I don't see where they've diminished the value. Looking at the pictures of the property where cars are being parked up in the front, and no street parking, and I get what the historical district is doing. I get it, but I'm also looking at where common sense needs to come in and prevail over a situation to where you have somebody that is fixing up things. You know, we're talking about that the city should be contacted about the parking area. I'm having a hard time moving in this direction.
Let's do this. If you have any questions for it, because we'll come back to the committee and talk about it, right?
I guess where I'm going with this, to my question is, when you say that we're mailing out, if they have questions and call and things like that, and I'm listening to what she's saying as far as living in the area, the historical and the city may be looking at it from their point of view, and I'm interested in what their view might be looking at their point of view. I mean, for what she grew up in this area, what she's thinking that this should be, or what she grew up and is expecting, I'm thinking is by far different than somebody who's not in here. So is there a chance that the city may have dropped the ball and not was able to give them this information? Because I'm having a hard time digesting it with attorneys explaining it to me.
I can't say specifically if the city dropped the ball. I don't have to say what was sent out, but the standard practice of the city, property appraiser, send out these notices once a month. Anyone who buys property.
Okay, and that's where I have the hard time of forcing or putting a hardship on somebody if I don't feel convinced with compelling evidence that they know what was supposed to be done. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrar. Mr. Carter for the second time.
I meant to ask this earlier, so you're attorney for the historical preservation?
Yes, and for the city.
So are you paid?
No, I work for the city in the Office of General Counsel. I work with the Office of General Counsel.
Okay. Next question,
But
Mr.
I am paid, yeah.
Next question, Mr. Huxford. You said that if it got, the appeal got approved, it'd go back to the planning commission for the, it could go back to the planning commission for the right-of-way part, correct?
Through the chair, it's never been to planning commission. It's been to historic preservation.
No, I said
for
it would
these
go, but if it went.
It would go on to the planning commission for consideration for the variance for the parking.
So,
yeah.
so then if they denied it and they appealed it, it'd come to us again.
That's correct.
Okay, but if we approve it here and we okay with all that, then it don't just go through.
Yep.
And keep a whole layer of an hour and a half worth of work down from.
If they go through the variance process and it gets appealed and it comes here and LUZ approves it, then they're on their way. But if the planning commission approves the variance, they're on their way. But again, I can't predict what the planning commission will do.
Who can?
Ms. Brown, and then Danny back then for the second time.
Okay, first question. Let's forget about the fact that, let's take the pavers out of the situation. Did they violate any other, with the renovations of the property, they violate any other preservation, historic, as far as you know of? Did everything else was in compliance?
The besides the pavers and the parking lot in the front.
Yes.
They also did not get a COA for the pavers in the back, and they also did not get a COA for screening in the back porch. But those two things were approved by the commission.
Okay, so you approved the back porch and the pavers in the back, but I'm talking about as far as structure of the house, the renovation, the roof, everything else.
So the Historic Preservation Commission only focuses on the aesthetic design of the property. They don't look at roofing permits, they don't look at interior plumbing or anything like that, solely on the outside. And I believe they received a COA for the roof. The only thing, as I said, there was a fence violation, I believe, so that was corrected, and the parking pad.
Okay, I think for me, I'm trying to figure out how the historic preservation has translated the new process for the pavers, since this has been done since 2015. So previously, you were not evaluating the pavers, correct?
I don't believe that they were still evaluated. They still trigger the Historic Preservation Commission approval. But what the commission did is they allowed for administrative approval. So they said these types of bricks can be approved by the staff without having to go in front of the commission. That's what was approved in 2015.
Okay.
So that the staff can approve it. If a property owner wants something different than the pre-approved pavers, then they go to the commission. So repaving your front driveway or a parking pad, that has always been required to go before the commission.
Okay, thank you. My question is to, I guess, the planning department folks. We've seen where, like in my district, where people pipe ditches and things of that nature that didn't get permits, and they did it anyway. What do we historically do in those type of situations? Let's just say it wasn't a historical area, and you have it where other areas where they go in, they put their own pipes in, they go and put their own driveway in, and they didn't, and it's the same process for us getting a permit.
In general, our goal is to achieve compliance, and that would either mean that they need to reverse the work, or they could perhaps come in and get it properly permitted and approved through inspection. It just depends on the nature of what they've done.
Let's say it's already completed. And
Yeah, same thing. Even if it's finished, we will need to determine whether the most appropriate route is to simply reverse the work or to inspect it and let them go ahead and get a retroactive permit. It just depends on what they've done.
Okay.
Ms. Brown, we're finished.
Thank
but
you.
This is something we can bring back into committee and ask. Mr. Beckton, is this to this issue?
Thank you to the chair. You agree that parking's been allowed on this property for more years than we can probably look back, correct?
I wouldn't say it was allowed, but it's
Well,
taking place.
It was not, there was nothing, no negative consequences for parking in the front.
I think there was negative consequences that created mud.
I know,
There's
but
a
I'm looking for no code violation or anything was given, no ticket, no thing. I'm just asking a question.
I can't answer that if it happened prior.
Yeah. So if they're not parking in the front, where are they parking?
So maybe this will help. The commission approved them the ability to park in the front. The commission said there's a problem with parking in this area. You're allowed to park in the front. But because we're allowing you to park in the front, we want to make sure that the pavers are compatible on a design level.
Only got so much time. So I'm, because I'm looking at a Google Earth, and certainly this building takes up probably 80% of the property. That we agree that they're pretty much limited. I mean, they have to park in the front.
Go ahead.
So for the planning department, so on the historic preservation, did they have an application fee that they had to pay in order to go before the HPC?
Through the chair, yes, there would have been a standard application fee.
What
had
was
they
it,
come-
what is standard application fee? And while, if you're looking that up, I'll keep going. So they would have to go, if this were to get approved, to say, they'd have to go seek a variance, and that's got an application fee, correct? What would that be, Mr. Huxford?
With notices, I would estimate it at about $1,100.
Okay. Let's say the planning commission denied it, and they wanted to appeal it back to us. That'd be another application fee, right?
Yes, sir.
What would that be?
That's filed with Legislative Services. I'm not certain, but I think the fee is in the neighborhood of $600, $700.
Okay, $600-700. Okay. Then, if, let's say we did approve it, they have to do the right-of-way. Is that an application fee?
They would need to apply to do work in the public right-of-way from Development Services. I'm sure there's a fee. I have no idea what it is, though.
Okay, there's a fee. Do you guys approve that and deny it? Is that how that works? Is that an administrative decision?
Yes, sir. That's handled at an administrative level.
Okay, let's say y'all denied it. How would they appeal that? To City Council?
I don't know their processes, so I'm not sure. There must be some relief mechanism in there, but I couldn't tell you what it is. I don't want to
Ms.
venture a
Grandin,
guess.
can you help us on that?
I'd need to look that up, so I'll look that up.
Okay. So we're asking if the right of way were to get denied, would it come back to City Council? Did you get a fee on their
Through the
application?
chair, the standard fee would be $315, and for a violation, it would be double, so it'd be $630.
Okay, so they're in at 630. All right. I believe that's. Is the garage historic? Is it considered historic?
Yes.
So the garage is part of the historic
It's
nature of the. So it could not be torn down, correct?
It could be torn down if they had an application and the commission approved it.
If the commission approved it, yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Great. There's no one else on the queue. Thank you very much, Mrs. Fentner. Thank you. Right now, we have a chance for the appellant to rebuttal. You have 3 minutes. If Ms. Ringhaver, if you'd like to say a few words. 3 minutes, please.
I would like to just say we didn't add a parking lot. We improved the existing mud lot. And also from the 50s, I have a picture from the 50s of cars parking there. So it has been going on. We also did not receive a letter from the historic department. There was, I'm not sure exact time of when we bought our other historic building, but it was surprising to me that months later after we bought that, which we were close to finished with our other renovations, we receive a COA, a letter saying this is a historic property. I let the commissioners know at our previous meetings, no letter was ever received. Yes, we grew up in Avondale. We haven't been in Jacksonville in more than 20 years. And coming to look at a block like the block that we have our building on, it's sad because it seems like things have gone just downhill. So we come in and truly improve it and make it beautiful and don't take away anything of historical integrity, but rather finally the building can be noticed. And we feel that we are being penalized for that. That is why we've gone all the extra steps to hopefully win this battle, because we believe in doing this. We have restored our properties just beautifully and in line with all of the historic codes, with the exception of this. That is from the time. Those COAs that were pulled at the beginning, again, were pulled by our roofer. I don't know that he's pulling a COA. My signature's not even on there. We hire a contractor to do the roofing. The biggest shock to us was when we found out that parking wasn't even allowed in the front. We assumed that would have been grandfathered in. They've always parked there from the 50s, even before then. Cars just cannot fit in the back, but that's not an issue. The issue is the style of pavers we chose. All of those decisions, again, made before we were ever notified of having to get COAs, and from the date that we received our first violation, there's never been a single violation since then. We do respect the rules, and we appreciate them. Not in this case, because we we may have to lift them, but we pray that we don't have to, because they're beautiful. The property is now something that people will look at on the historical corner of Aberdeen. While they're trying to get away from those potholes, they're now going to notice our beautiful building that is now maintained, and that's really all I want to say.
Great, thank you very much,
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Ringhaver.
Thank you.
No one, Mr. Ferrara, you came on the queue.
While she was up, I was just going to
Yeah,
ask
go
her a
ahead.
question. Two things you said that caught my attention. You've had no violations other than this, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and
And the day we received the violation, we got on the phone with anybody to say, how can we fix this?
The other
This was
thing
not an intentional.
the other thing is that you said that you didn't receive any of this information
We
until
did
after.
not. We did not.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, there's no one else on the queue. Mr. Beckton? Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Ringhaver. Yeah, we're coming back to the committee. Go ahead. Well, go ahead. You were on the queue first, Mr. Beckton. Go.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we approve the appeal and deny the Historic Preservation's decision on this.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Gaffney, you're on the queue.
Basically, it was on the same thing, but what I would like to approve it, but I also want to put some conditions, so at what point we add some conditions.
You can do something now.
Well, I'm not sure what all the conditions need to be, and this way Mr. Folks can help me, because I want to make sure that they pay the fees, or the fees that is due to the city, because they did not directly go to y'all first. I'm not sure what all they are. So I know that Mr. Betton kept asking what was the cost. So I think all I'm trying to do is roll in all the fees that is due to the city that need to be paid by the applicant.
Through the chair, obviously they've sat through this, they understand, or they've been told what they need to do. We will collect those fees as part of our regular administrative process when they come in and file their applications. There's no need to ask for collection in advance of it. That's something that will happen as they apply for their applications.
So you don't, and you tell me, because I just want to make sure that, I also want to make sure that when they come to y'all understand that this is what we expect. Because I'm hoping that they don't have to come back to us for a denial.
Since there's no way to waive the application fee, they'll automatically have to pay it.
Okay.
Yeah, the staff does not have the ability to administratively waive something that the city council has put on the books.
No, I don't want to waive. I want them to pay it.
Oh, they will.
Okay. All right. Well,
We like our money.
And that's fine then. So I'm going to second this for now.
Okay. Mr. Beckton, you're back on. But is this has to do, because Mr. Carter has not spoken. This is on what you're, right. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. No, I just want to explain why I'm made this motion to approve the appeal. This is, they're going to have to replace this at $19,000, and this is based on artistic color, decisions, and I think this goes into classification of undue hardship. And yes, they did not do the process exactly as they should have, but I don't find this egregious. I'm using reasonable decisions, and the fact that in looking at what they've done, I don't find to be able to go and just say, hey, you have to pull this up. Parking has been allowed for many, many, many years. I think we've established there's no reasonable parking that would put them in compliance without having to go get a variance in a right-of-way. So, I have a hard time denying it because of that reason, and I think even our attorney has stated that that wasn't the problem anyway. It was just really the artistic colors of the and type of pavers. I don't want the ring havers to walk out of here and say, you know, there's no penalty for this, and I don't, you know, certainly don't want to set a precedent to other people to, you know, to not follow the COA process. Shame on you. But the reason I outlined the fees is right now they're going to be in for between $3,000 and $4,000, not having gotten the final tallies from the planning department of some of the other fees, but they're not finished. They're going to have to go get a variance. They might get rejected. They might have to come back here, pay another fee, come before us. The right-of-way permit. I think I'd like to say I hope we've learned a valuable lesson, and they're not getting off scot-free on this. There is a financial penalty, somewhere $3,000 to $4,000. I'm estimating in having not simply gone to the COA process and got it. So I don't think that we're just letting them get off without, you know, without some type of slap on the wrist on this. But I just don't find this in the level of egregious where I'm going to make them go pull up $19,000 worth of pavers and replace them because we don't like the shape and the color of what they do. I find it very complementary to what's in the neighborhood already. That, as we said, is illegal, but we're not doing anything about it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Brett. And there was no one else in queue, and since all we have is move to grant the appeal. Is that correct? Good enough. No one else on the queue. Open the ballot and record your vote.
Five yeas, one nay.
Right, by your action, you have approved the appeal. Thank you very much. Let's turn to page 2 at the beginning, and we'll start at the beginning, although I did mention that I will bring one bill up quicker. Okay, page 2, 2016-95. It's the public hearing's been open and continued to September 6th, as is 2016-368. And on number 3, 2016-576 is open and continued. And what was, okay, I'm going back to what we are going to do. Okay, Ms. Grandin, it was a positive vote.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, this would require an amendment because the bill is written in the neutral. So you would have to, what I think Councilmember Becton did it, and I think it was seconded by Mr. Gaffney, amend the bill. So the amendment would be to approve the appeal, and then you would move the bill as amended. So just, it's a procedural thing, just because the
Okay,
bill
let's
is
start
written in
again.
the
We're going to
neutral.
go back to 455. Okay, Mr. Beckton, would you go ahead and proceed, please?
Yes, to the chair. So I'm going to amend the bill to approve the appeal.
Right. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Okay, you don't want, you want to talk again? Okay, great. So all in favor of the amendment, say aye. No, no. Now,
Move the motion to move the bill as amended.
great. Seconded. Okay, now we're ready to roll. Correct? Great. Open the ballot, record your vote. Thank you.
5 yeas, 1 nay.
Great. By your action, you have approved the appeal. Thank you very much. Ms. Grandin? Okay, we'll go back to page 2, 2016-576. The public hearing is open and continued to September 6th, and it is now in deferral status already. Item page 3, 2016-676 has been open and continued to September 6th. 2017-89 is deferred. Page 4, 2017-90 is deferred. 2017-231 is open to continue to September 6th, and it's also deferred. Item let's go to item 9. Do a second. We have to have an open. We're going to go to planning department. Is that right? We're going to do a number 9.
Mr. Chairman, we normally don't give a presentation. However, Paul Davis with the Development Services Division is here in the event that in the event that there are questions, and he's in our audience tonight.
Okay, great. Okay, it's been. We're going to open the public hearing. Do we have any cards? 323. No cards. We're going to close the public hearing. Been moved and seconded. Great. By your, there's no one on the queue. Open the ballot for 2017-323. Wait a second. It doesn't say any amendments on this bill. It is. Okay, now how come this wasn't noticed, the amendment? Huh? Okay, let's step back up. Why isn't this noted on the marked agenda?
I should have told Jessica about it. TEU amended it yesterday.
I know, but that would have been 24 hours. My question is, why wasn't it notified in the agenda or now that it wasn't amended? Be that as it may, you've been given a amended. Ms. Grandy, tell us what the amendment is, since we just got it, and even though it was in TEU yesterday.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, and through the chair to the committee. Basically, there's some technical amendments. We are switching out the exhibit, and the exhibit is the second amendment to the development agreement. And basically, what it has in here that it switches is well, let me just tell you what the second amendment does. It changes the name of the owner and the transferee of the development rights. It extends the time to June 22nd, 2022. The amendment has to do with, there was a typo in between, that it was at first said it was going to have the public hearing here at LUZ, but it should have been at TEU. So there was a typo there between the bill and the actual contract itself, so we fixed that. Additionally, in the contract, as part of the amendment.
Wait a second. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Beckton. Point of order. Rick, go ahead. What's the point of order?
That we need to get this amendment on the floor to have a discussion.
Okay.
So I motion to move the amendment.
Right.
All
It's
right.
moved and seconded. Go ahead.
Okay. And so the final amendment to the contract is we added a provision at the end of the contract, which you'll see on the last page, where it says consented to by. The history of this is the Baptist Health Properties bought this piece of property out of foreclosure. It bought it from Synovus Bank. Synovus Bank took it over from Liberty Property, which is who we have the development agreement with from a long time ago. Baptist has paid over $100,000 in getting their development agreement fees brought up to date. And we've actually issued them a CRC to build more units, more square feet out there. They've already built 85,000 square feet of buildings out there since this. So it's been a going on concern. We have Mac McCullough out here, who's the attorney for Baptist Health Properties, and Paul Davis, who's the CMMSO for the city, who can explain other technical things about it. But basically, the amendment has to do with making the legislation and the amended contract marry up with each other.
Okay. First of all, I guess I'm kind of disappointed. There's 3 or 4, 5 pages here of changes, and we just now got it. We could have had it at an agenda, and we could have had it even before agenda. So I'm kind of disappointed where we are. There's no one on the queue, and since this is my only argument, I'm disappointed. It's been amended. All in favor say aye. No? Okay. The bill's been moved and it's been seconded. There's no one in the queue. Open the ballot, record your vote.
6 yeas, 0 nays.
Your action, you have approved 2017-323. Let's go back to 8. 2017-314, we're going to open the public hearing. Before that, we're going to hear from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've seen this one on your agenda for a couple of cycles now. This is ordinance 2017-314, also tracked as waiver of road frontage, WRF 1709.
Oh, 1 second, hold on. Is this the one I wanted to defer?
No, sir.
Okay, good enough.
This is for property at 7380 Townsend Road on the west side. The request is to reduce the required frontage from 80 feet to 0 feet so that the 5-acre piece of land can be developed with one single-family residence. And just to explain a little further, the reduction from 80 feet to 0 feet simply means that the property that they want to improve doesn't have literal frontage along an approved public road. It doesn't mean they don't have access. They do. It just means it's not up along a public road to meet our minimum standards of the code, so they're seeking to waive that. If granted, the waiver would only yield one residence. Any further residences on the property would have to come back to the Land Use and Zoning Committee for further consideration. Staff reviewed the application. We did note that the Planning Commission granted a variance back in 1995. It was for the same type of request, but back then we didn't have waivers, and so it was a variance, and it went to the Planning Commission, and they granted it. However, the grant of the exception was never commenced. They never built on it. So after 1 year, the variance expired. Since that time, anybody wishing to develop a residence on this property would need to come forward and ask for their own relief. That's what this applicant is doing. There has been some question about the right-of-way for Townsend Road. Townsend Road is one of those old platted Jacksonville Heights plats roadways that's kind of discontinuous. It starts and stops and picks up again and stops again as it goes east and west. This is on a portion that's to the east of Ricker Road, and a portion of it is an approved public road, and there's been some houses that have been built. However, once you reach a certain point east of Ricker Road, the right-of-way continues, but the pavement does not. This property has some frontage along a portion of that right-of-way. There has been some question about the status of the right-of-way. Monroe Hazen with the Public Works Department is out in the audience to answer the specifics of that. That's a little bit out of my league. I do the best I can, but he's much more of an expert on that. And so he can speak to the platting and the availability of the right-of-way if y'all have questions. We reviewed this, and given the historical precedent of the approval that was granted previously primarily, staff has recommended approval. We do have 2 conditions on here. In looking at them, the first one is it states that the property owner shall be responsible for naming a driveway access according to the standards of the Planning and Development Department's addressing section. If this is granted, that is something they're going to have to do anyway. I really don't like putting conditions on something that someone's going to have to do anyway, because then it implies that if there's a tweak to the language that y'all have amended something. The second condition is something that we throw on staff reports when we have any other condition. Given that number 1 is redundant, given a process they're going to have to follow anyway if this is granted, I would suggest that we just drop the conditions and just go with a straight approval if after you hear the arguments from both sides you want to go forward.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huxford. There's no one on the queue. So what we're going to do is open the public hearing. Are there any